Number 4. Batman. Yeah, I know that's 2 Batman movies on this list, but Tim Burton's Batman, to me, is still a standout amongst comic book films, even after all these years. Up until this film, Batman's reputation got dragged through the mud a little bit thanks to the 1960s show. This was a movie that took forever to get into production, and even when production finally started, fans' worries didn't stop. Tim Burton was a questionable director, mainly because he only had 2 feature-length films under his belt, and Michael Keaton as Batman angered fans, but the movie that everyone worried about turned out to be, in my view, the best Batman movie ever made. While I also like the efforts of Christopher Nolan and I'm looking forward to his 3rd Batman movie, I still think Tim Burton understood the character of Batman best. He managed to keep the comic book style very much alive while also making the movie very dark and gritty, which is quite an accomplishment, and I also love the story. Plus, the movie is tremendously well acted, with marvelous performances by Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. I know a lot of today's fans like to complain that the movie lacks action compared to today's movies, but I think that's what makes it great. It's more story and character driven, and that works for a movie like this. It's not always about the action. So overall, Batman is truly a classic, and I will always love this movie. Number 3. V for Vendetta. This is a standout to me mainly because this had the potential to be the biggest joke ever released in theaters. Out of all the comics I read, Vendetta was one of the weirdest in both its setting and also its characters. The story was also very odd for a comic book and was a bit uneven in areas. Vendetta has been called the Phantom of the Opera of comics because it does seem to borrow a little bit from that classic tale, especially for its main character. However, when I saw it in theaters, I was surprised at how awesome it turned out. Maybe it's because of how our world is now, but the story made a lot of sense and seemed very down to earth in a lot of ways, and the main characters turned out fantastic. The characters is what I was most worried about because the main character wears a mask and has no expression, and I didn't think that was going to work for this movie, but it turned out perfect, and for some reason that mask gave him even more character and even more personality. I thought the acting was perfect, and the cinematography is beautiful. James McTeague did a great job on the look of the film. So while I was afraid on how the movie would turn out, this turned out to be one of the best movies ever made. Number 2. Sin City. Sin City was a film that I had a feeling was going to be good. I just didn't know how good. I love Frank Miller's work. He has such a unique style, and seeing how this film was going to remain loyal to that style really intrigued me, and I was really looking forward to seeing it in theaters. Not only does it live up to expectations, but it exceeds them by a lot. Sin City was just an unbelievably beautifully made movie that is just wonderful from beginning to end. One of the aspects that I'm really surprised worked was the stories. Sin City the comic is very well known for having different stories in one issue, and each story continues throughout the comics in some way. They kept that in the film, and it turned out to be one of the more unique elements of the film, and actually made the film better and more interesting to watch. Going back to the style of the film, Frank Miller was one of the directors on this film, which is why it's so loyal. Not only is the tone very loyal, but also the color scheme, which that in itself is very unique because, like the comic book, the primary colors in the film are red and gray, which you think would be a little weird, but for some reason it looks very natural and you adjust to this immediately, almost as if there's nothing different about it. Add in a great cast and great performances, and Sin City easily stands out in the world of comic book adaptations. Sin City 2 has become easily one of the most talked about comic book film sequels ever, and yet it is unclear when it's going to be released. I really hope it releases sometime soon because I would love to see another Sin City movie in theaters. And number 1, The Crow. The Crow has been my all-time favorite comic book film since I first viewed it. It's one of those films that just keeps your eyes on the screen and is so captivating that you can't help but watch it over and over again. From the film's visual style all the way down to the cast and the acting, this film is, to me, the perfect film. Plot-wise, it remains very loyal to the comic with a few changes made to make it a movie and not just an adaptation, which is what all comic book films do. For instance, every single film on this list has done the exact same thing. One of the elements that really attracted me to the film when I first saw it was its tone and its gritty feel, which is one of the reasons why I like movies like Batman so much. And like Batman, it also manages to keep the tone loyal to the comic as well. While dark and gritty, it still feels like it came straight out of the comic. Also, Brandon Lee was perfect as the main character. He gave the best performance. In fact, this film was widely considered his breakout role. But unfortunately, his breakout role was his last one, as he was accidentally shot on set and died soon afterwards in a hospital. There have been direct-to-video sequels to The Crow released, and it's easy to see why they're direct-to-video. They're awful movies and don't even come close to capturing the magic that the first film had. There have been talks about a remake, and in all honesty, I don't want to see one. The Crow is one of those films that doesn't need one, and I really hope the remake never gets made. Well, that's my top 10 comic book films so far. Obviously, with comic book films set to release this year like The Avengers and The Dark Knight Rises, and many more in the years to come, this list will most likely see some change in due time. But these are the ones that I consider to be the best at the current moment. Well, everyone, that's it for now. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.